how did you survive the crash of January 16th, 2018?
Just buying the dip. That's the only way to survive. Hold and buy the dip.
That's right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening whenever you may be listening, and welcome to Latitude, the 43 North podcast. I'm your host, Nate Benson, digital media manager here at 43 North, and we're over 40 episodes into this podcast, and I'm thrilled to be hosting it, despite it being early in the morning, and I'm only on my third cup of coffee, so I'm not fully awake yet. But thank you so much for subscribing, liking these episodes, leaving reviews, and if you haven't left a review yet, please head over to iTunes. Leave us a 5-star review. The more 5-star reviews we have, the more people this podcast gets in front of, and the more people that listen to this download. Wow, I really haven't had coffee yet, have I? The more people that listen to this podcast, the better. And really, we just want to share the message about all the great things happening here in the Buffalo, Western New York startup scene. This week on the podcast, we have Dan Magnuszewski, CTO of ACV Auctions, the $2015 million winner of the 43 North competition. They're about to hire their 200th employee, which is just fascinating and great for them. They've seen a meteoric rise these last few years. You know, they just moved up to their new location at the Innovation Center here in the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, and it's just wonderful news to see all these new hires locally with a startup. This week, Dan talks about his early days in the startup scene, but it really dates back to all the way in high school when Dan learned IT and networking at Sweet Home High School. We also talk with Dan about Z80 Labs. He was the first managing director of Z80 Labs, and then how he left Z80 Labs to join ACV Auctions. And we wrap things up in this episode, of course, talking about blockchain, because Dan really loves blockchain. So let's not waste another minute with me, and let's get right into this week's episode. Dan, how's everything going?
Things are going very well.
You're a busy guy. I always see you in the incubator in a hurry.
Yeah.
Some meetings and...
Yeah, there's always lots to do, and we've been really scaling up the business, and so that with that comes more people and bringing on more people and more projects. So it's always a very busy thing. So
let's rewind a little bit. When did you first kind of get the tech itch? Was it in grade school? Was it dealing in HyperCard? I dealt with HyperCard back in my elementary school a little bit. So what was the tech itch for you? Because you're a big tech guy.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut, and
we all did.
Right.
We all did.
And I was like, all right, that's great. I'll be an astronaut, and all right, let's go do that. And then I realized I wasn't really good at math.
Bingo. Yeah, that's when I was like, wow, I lost interest really quick in that.
Yeah. And
math and I do not get along.
Right. So I just said, okay, well, I guess I can't do that, but maybe I can work on the computers and, that go into space or something.
I'll get the ship.
There's a lot of computers like that. That's pretty interesting. So I started, getting into, looking towards that angle in terms of a career and, what I'd get into. But, when... I think in about middle school when everybody else was getting computers, and this was, mid-'90s at that point, my mom, and I always give her a lot of crap for this, but instead of getting a computer, she bought Encyclopedia Britannica, which was the same exact cost at that point. And so we had this Encyclopedia Britannica that sat on, across many shelves, collecting dust for a little while. But,
I wanted one so bad. And because I saw the commercials on Nickelodeon for Encyclopedia Britannica, everything.
Yeah. So
they're still sitting at the top of our stairs when we go home, just staring me in the eye. I haven't cracked them open in about 15 years.
Yeah. So, but I had friends that had computers, and I somewhat got into it. But it wasn't until I got into high school, and we had I went to Sweet Home High School here in Buffalo, and we had a intro to web design and a keyboarding class and all this other stuff. So I started doing that, getting involved in HTML. And towards the end of my high school career, they had a Cisco Network Academy, which was building networks and configuring routers and things like that. So
a bit ahead of its time then. This is what, early 2000s?
this was like 2000, yeah.
Yeah,
2000,
STEM is such a big popular thing now, and getting those classes back into the curriculum, and here you are back right at the .com burst doing the same thing.
Yeah, and it was Cisco created this academy because what they saw was there was going to be a shortage of network engineers, and the internet was exploding, and more companies were having intranets and connecting to the internet. And there was a huge need for this type of skill set that nobody had,
right,
or not enough people had, in terms of growth. So Cisco was like, all right, we're going to get ahead of it. We're going to get students in high school to start participating and learn the skills, and somewhat be familiar with the Cisco brand, and so it's kind of a really they built out this farm team, and so I think Sweet Home was one of the first in the area to have it.
Wow.
And and then that was right before the whole the .com bubble burst, and then it was like, oh yeah, now there's no jobs. Don't worry about it. So,
now what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, yeah. But so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go towards the networking side of things, and so I wasn't as much into programming, but I already established, all right, I'm going to go to the University of Buffalo, computer science, and see if I can maybe play around with the software side of things as opposed to the networking side of things. And then when I got into UB and started really getting into the software side of things and less into the networking. So I kind of evolved as I went on, and what I thought I was going to do. But that's kind of the path that got me into UB. And out of high school, I was able to get Cisco certified,
mm-hmm.
and I started working at M&T right after high school, and then through college with that. So that's what kind of got me in. And then right out of high school, I was working a real job, and utilizing the skills that I learned from that.
So how'd you go from the straight-laced 9 to 5, 401k, M&T, big banking
yeah.
job, to Z80? What was was there something else in the middle of that?
Yeah, there was a whole lot of things in the middle. So I was at M&T for like 6 years through college and 2 years after.
Which I imagine is a great gig right out of school. It's like, oh, I've got this. Yeah,
I got a job. I got a job. It was it's good going through school. Like, okay, I just got to get out of here because I already have a job and doing real things in the real world. So I did that, and then it was kind of reaching a point where. I think if you're in, I was looking for a more faster environment where I could learn more things faster. The bigger the company, the more niche your skill set gets, the slower it moves, the more meetings you have to have. The joke with M&T is that it's M&T stands for meet and talk, and so looking for something different. And Cinecore was still growing and still in that middle phase, maybe. That pubescent stage where they were really starting to ramp up. I knew some people over there and decided to make a jump over to Cinecore. I started there as a systems administrator, later moved on to do software development over there. And I was there for a while, and I've always, ever since I was young, I wanted to start my own company or invent different things. I always had a book of inventions that I would kind of make, and bunch of family members have their own businesses, so it was just kind of a natural path. And I sit there, and the famous thing I always say is I was sitting there, and I was like, if I stay here, will I ever be able to afford a yacht? And the answer was just no. So I was like, all right, I got to go do my own thing. And so a buddy of mine, Steve Poland, was looking for a software engineer, a developer that can come in. He had an idea, and we were going to work on it. And he's like, do you know anyone? I was like, I could jump and do that. So left Cinecore after about 4 years, and Steve Poland and I started this company. And I was actually at that point that Open Coffee Club was getting going here in Buffalo, and we met Nick Baroni and a bunch of other local freelancers or technologists, so we got that going. 6 months later, we shut it down, and it failed. So at that point, I was like, oh, all right, I need to.
It didn't really fail, though. I mean, because all you guys are,
play
pivotal roles in the startups.
Right. It was the sacrificial lamb, I guess. So at that point, I was like, all right, now what do I do? So I started doing some freelancing. I started working with people out of New York City and West Coast and Chicago who had ideas for companies. They had some funding, but they needed a technical resource to take their idea, mold it into something, and then build it.
Not like a lot of people, you kind of went the opposite route. You didn't leave Buffalo out of because you had the job at M&amp. Was there any thought at this point, because you're kind of freelancing and kind of floating around, maybe Buffalo wasn't the place to be, or was Buffalo always true at heart?
Yeah, no, I never thought of going anywhere. I never really had to. I enjoy making, San Francisco and New York City wages while living in Buffalo is a beautiful thing. And I never really had the need. We were building a cool little community at that time of entrepreneurs and technologists, and I saw a lot of opportunity, here in Buffalo and in the people we were starting to do work with, and a lot of these different meetups that were coming up. So, I was pretty bullish on that, and just never had a need to kind of look elsewhere. So I was doing that for a while, and then I started working more, pretty much solely with this other startup that had money out of New York City. The engineering was being built out of Buffalo. So I joined there as we were starting that up, and I was there for about a year or so when, and I guess all during that time I was traveling around New York State, going mainly upstate, but going to different meetups in Syracuse, Rochester, Ithaca, just trying to see what else other people were doing in upstate in terms of startups and other technologists. So
it seemed like most of upstate at the time was kind of similar to Buffalo, kind of fledgling along and trying to get something organized, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of them were a lot further ahead. In Syracuse, they had the Tech Garden, and we really didn't have much of anything. There was nobody in the government was talking about entrepreneurship. Yeah. Nobody was. So it was just kind of a bunch of grassroots engineers that were running around, just trying to get stuff done. So that was trying to connect Buffalo with some of these other people, let them know what's going on in Buffalo and vice versa. So I was doing a lot of that, which was cool. Around that time we also started a co-working space here in Buffalo called Co-work Buffalo, and that was just another effort for us to, we said, hey, all these other cities have co-working spaces. We have all these freelancers that are all working out of their house. Like, how do we build a community around the smart people in the area and give them a place to come hang out and know who else is out there? Sure. Because there's a lot of people doing interesting things, but they work for other companies outside the area, or they're doing their own thing and they're just working out of their basement. So how do you pull those people out? So so Co-work Buffalo got started along that time as well. And so towards the end of, I guess, early 2012, we heard about Z80 Labs opening. That was interesting to me because I was already doing a lot of that outreach into these other events and meetups, and even working with, I was at that point doing some mentoring for startup companies as well. And so I was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. And, I wasn't a huge fan of the direction of this startup that I was at. And I said, okay, this is maybe a good chance for me to jump into more of the, investing, venture capital side of things, and kind of hone that, my non-technical skill set a little bit more. So I met with Ron and Jordy, and ended up getting the gig at Z80 Labs to get that off the ground and get it going.
What was the experience like? Because Buffalo really hadn't seen anything like that. That organized effort to engage with early stage startups, bring venture capital in, invest in companies like that, on the scale that Z80 does it. So what was that whole experience in the early stage process like?
Yeah, I mean, it was it was interesting. I mean, it was I gave a talk in Canada on in St. Catharines on growing a garden in the desert, and that's kind of a good way to phrase it. But yeah, I mean, it was tricky when when Steve Pohl and I were working on our company in 2010, early 2011. We were trying, at some point we were like, we should raise some capital and all that. We kind of bootstrapped it initially, and we were looking to raise capital, and talking with Buffalo Angels and other groups like that. Coming from the startup side, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, there's just not enough capital in Buffalo. There's no VC dollars." And then talking, I would volunteer at different forums and events that Buffalo Angels would put on in Western New York Venture Association, and their response was always, "Well, there's not the companies, right? So there's always that
chicken egg.
Yeah,
debate.
you need companies to get funding, but funding needs companies. So it was an interesting time, and the nice thing about Z80 was it was a place that we could help foster those really early stage that is maybe earlier than most local investors may want to put money into. Help, and we had money ourselves, so there was there was a need to somehow kickstart that whole process, and I think Z80 did that by having attention on it. There was a place to go, and that was always our goal. Was there? It's a place to go. We could bring in, we brought in VCs and other people from all over the country that would come in and talk to the companies, give them advice, things like that, and just getting that exposure to have Fred Wilson come in. Just to meet with a bunch of companies and talk to you, like that's it. In a way, it's easier than trying to do that when he's in New York City where he lives, right?
And getting someone like Fred here is like the Rolling Stones playing,
right? Yeah. It was great. Yeah, and we were able to bring in some really good names, and there was a buzz about it too. I think in other areas where they knew what we were doing, people would reach out, "Hey, we're going to be in Buffalo," or "Hey, someone's looking to move back to Buffalo." And there was a lot of that. And I would get, maybe a call a week on people like, "Hey, I just heard about Z80. This looks great. I'm thinking about moving back at some point," or, whatever it was. But it added a lot of excitement outside, for a lot of the expats that were out there, and they left and there was nothing. And, whether they're in the West Coast or in New York City, and having a lot of those resources, seeing that was available in Buffalo, they just thought was the greatest thing. So. But it was good. I think it was definitely that, what we needed to get it going. But I mean, it was it was a tough go. When you're going from nothing, and I had known people that were in Buffalo starting companies and they left for one reason or another. And so how do you rebuild that base that you can start growing off of? And that was the trick. But with time and with some successes and with outreach into the universities, outreach, other people who are thinking about, leaving where they're at to go start something. They now have a resource that they could go to, and it may make it seem more feasible. And so, that was really the goal of it, and being able to provide, we had $5 million of early stage money, and I want to say like total of Z80 investments, or maybe it was just local Buffalo. When we started, it was maybe close to, maybe it was a couple $100,000 or whatever. And I think it was it last year or the year before? I mean, it was, it's over like 100 million, right? So you just look at that and like where we've come from, and, there being nothing, and there being, no involvement from the government, no involvement from other areas, and now government, focusing on that as a way for economic development as opposed to silver bullet projects. I think all of that's really good, and we've come such a far way from when I in 2003 when we started, one of the first tech meetups I was involved in, right? And there was 10, 15 people, and it was just very, very focused. But now it's there's so many events going on, so many different groups, and you have things like Buffalo Game Space helping people learn how to build video games. You have the Maker Space and Buffalo Lab and the Foundry and all these, and then just what's going on here with Z80 Labs and 43 North, and now the companies that are exiting out from there and going in other places, and getting their own offices, stuff like that. So, it's exciting. It was, it's definitely not an easy. It's not always like build it and they will come. You kind of have to foster.
You have to build it. You have to build massive neon signs.
Right. Give away free hot dogs and have everyone show up. So
if you want to learn more about Z80 Labs, head to the 43 North Latitude Archive. When we did an episode with John Spitz, we talked in depth with John about Z80 Labs. We're gonna shift now. You're heading up Z80 Labs, and then you left.
Yeah.
To do a small startup here in Buffalo.
Little thing, yeah.
4 guys, and you've gone from 4 guys to now just shy of 200 employees in a very quick time span.
Yeah. We started with 3 actually.
3,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it was. I guess I can tell that story. So yeah, I was at Z80 Labs. I like building things. I'm an engineer at heart, and really looking to get my hands dirty again. I kind of equated it to, still thinking I could be quarterback, but I'm just the quarterback's coach, right?
Yeah.
When you're investing and mentoring, there's only so much you can do, and it's not your job to go in and like go do stuff or like push things. You really have to leave it up to the team to find their own way, and you can guide them, you can mentor them, you can give them help them with resources, but at the end of the day, it's their company and they need to move things forward at a fast pace. So for me, I was just missing it. I for some reason was missing staying up till 4 a.m. coding and solving hard technical problems and business problems, and really focusing on one thing. And so I kind of had my eye out. Had a couple things I was looking at, and I got a call one day from a guy who had an idea. He's like, I just moved back to Buffalo. I'm working at a car dealership, but I have this idea, and it was around car auctions. And so I called him. I talked to him. I'm like, okay, but I'm like, my dad's a car dealer, and I'd grown up, putting my phone number in the Buffalo News in the classified section and taking calls and forwarding them over and having like a car in the driveway that was always for sale. So I knew about that. I knew about the auctions. They had a lot. So I understood from the used car dealer standpoint the problem and how it would make sense. So we were talking, and I'm like, you know what? Like I could build this. Yeah. So all right. So we sat down. I kind of walked Joe Neiman through just the normal process. All right, let's wireframe it. Let's figure out this. Let's work towards like what the whole use case is, and figure out what that minimal viable product could be.
Now, Joe said on the podcast that he walked you through all the wireframing and did all that stuff, but you have to go back to the archive and list that.
Okay. Well,
maybe I'm just stirring the pot here.
He did the wireframe. I told him how to do the wireframe. So
I'm just stirring the pot, obviously.
That's okay. But yeah, so we did that. We brought in. So this was even before Helm. Nick Brony, who I knew with the original startup with Steve. That's when we initially met. He had done some work with us. So, and I'd worked with him at other projects prior. So I said, hey, there's this thing, and I've seen a million ideas, and people want to do stuff, and then they flake out and whatever. So, I always go into these things assuming that nothing will happen.
Sure. You do enough freelancing, which I'd done in the video space, to know that this project's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and you do enough mentoring, you do enough, and most things don't ever happen, right? Or at some point,
just like startups, about 1 in 10 projects go through.
Right, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So brought him in. We started doing some designs of it. I started working on doing a bunch of the coding. We brought in another person to help with the mobile, and started talking to customers. It was even early on. I knew some people that I approached about funding. Mm-hmm. So they liked the idea. I had a relationship with them, so maybe it was more them investing in me as opposed to just the idea.
When did you know? Obviously Joe was able to kind of pique your interest with the idea initially, mm-hmm. but when did you know, hey, there's something here?
Yeah. So and we were working. We were working a lot, just trying to figure out what it is we were going to build and who we were selling it to, and just all the different components of what is now ACV and what pieces of it we were going to do initially, right?
Because that early on you could go in a variety of different areas that ultimately may not have looked like the company you guys have today.
Right. I mean, we started out. It was when we have a ton of people in operations. We handle title, we handle payments. We're now in transportation, and we're doing all these other things. And initially, when we were doing it, it was going to be okay. We'll let them mail each other the title, and we were super hands off. We're like, we'll raise like $250K, and there'll just be a couple of us. We'll bootstrap it and do all this other stuff, and this should just start churning cash, and low overhead in terms of people, and it'll be great. That's how we started it, right? And
how'd that work out?
Yeah, no. And then the more and more we got into it, it's like, oh, we have to, we really have to own this piece of it. Okay, we really got to do this other, we got to do titles, we got to do payments, we got to facilitate that, we got to do arbitration on these vehicles. So it kind of scaled up, and one of our early investors, he's like, I'm in. He's like, I think you need to raise more money, though. I'm looking at it. You're going to need more money, because you always need more money than you think you need, right? And it always goes faster than you think it will. So we're like, all right, that makes sense. So, as we were kind of getting this going, Jack Greco came on. I had known Jack for 5-6 years prior, more in the VC space, but I'd known him from going to these different events. So we brought him on, and we kind of had the initial three of us who were working on building this, getting it off the ground, talking to dealers. So getting back to your question, as we were building the product and it was starting to come along, as we were talking to more and more dealers, and that was a big thing that Joe was out doing, is just talking to everyone and understanding, really proving a bunch of our assumptions on, will this work? Will people even buy a car? Yeah. And he went out and started getting really good feedback. People wanted to use it like today, right?
There,
And and so around November, we had some interest in funding, interest from people using it who wanted to use it, and we kind of looked at each other like, okay, this is the time, like, it's a real thing. We need to jump. It seems like we'll be able to raise funding, hopefully, but there was something there. So by the end of 2014, so January 2015 is when we had both we all jumped from our jobs, and then we had full time started working on it and building it out.
Well, fast forward 2015 a little bit. You guys were the $1 million winner of the second 43 North competition. When you guys started incubating here in kind of the 43 North space in January of 16, still only a few employees to now 200.
Yep.
We'll call give or take. 200, a majority of which are based out of Buffalo. You obviously have field agents across the Northeast and the East Coast. That's textbook scaling and growth. And have any of you slept in 2 years?
Yeah. There's sleeping, but there's also waking up in the middle of the night as well. So, it's been great. We've, like you said, we started. We had 3 people. I think we had maybe like 5 people when we initially launched, when we didn't even know if this thing would work yet. And we sold the first car that went across the system, and like, okay, all right, good.
Now.
Okay, we didn't waste 6 months of our life. Great. And then we started realizing, okay, we need to bring someone on to manage title. When we launched, there was all the back-end processes that we just didn't get to yet, So there's a lot of manual running around. So we started pulling in some different people who had auction or automotive experience that could help understand the back end process of titles and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really so we raised $1 million in funding the summer prior to 43 North in 2015, and so we had that. We were scaling it out, and then we said, okay, well, if we can get another $1 million, that would allow us to, grow even faster and go into more markets and do some other things, from a development standpoint. So we did that, and then I think at that point we were 14 people, and now it's just kind of gone from there.
Prior to you guys moving up to Dig, and you'll be moving to the third or fourth floor?
Third floor,
of the Innovation Center. Literally, like every couple of days, like there was a orientation meeting.
We do them off-site now at a conference center in a hotel downtown here.
What are some of the challenges? Because obviously, you guys are very involved, obviously, daily. None of you have you retired or cashed in yet. You're still obviously plugging away at things. Now you have to build the company. You have to build the company culture. What has that experience been like? Because really, ACV is the first Buffalo kind of startup in many years. Probably Cinecore and Campus Labs are the other two examples.
Liaison,
yeah. There's a handful, but I guess in recent history, ACV has seen this exponential growth, and now you have to kind of build the company culture, what the company is defined by. What has that experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard when it's 3 people or 10 people in a room. It's a lot easier. There's a lot less personalities. There's a lot less, different things that go on. And so as you scaling people and scaling growth within the organization, how do you start adding the proper tiers in there in terms of either management or reporting structures? And so, that's really been the case. I think we went from like 40 to 200 in the last year, something like that. It's hard to keep track, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into it now. As you bring on more people and start creating different divisions, and you're splintering them out, and as you bring on people that fast, and especially as you bring on management at that rate, people who are running teams have a huge impact on culture and how what our beliefs are as a company, and being able to relay those down to everyone else and make sure everyone's following and living by those I guess to that culture and by those thoughts and what we think. So it's tough, but it is a different form of scaling. It's one of those things you're like, oh, well, that'd be a great problem to have, and then it's actually still a real problem, and now there's more money on the line. But
well, it's so interesting to kind of just sit back and observe you guys, because we all kind of collaborate here in the incubator space, and we all see kind of what's going on. And Jack's always yelling on a phone, not yelling, but Jack talks a lot.
Talking. He's not yelling, he's talking.
He's talking and confused.
Yeah.
We'll get him on. I want to have Jack on the podcast, but I know I won't even get hello in.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out how to manage that podcast. But we see you guys in constantly in meetings, and I don't think I've seen you code once. Anymore. So what's how do you transition to something like that, where you started wireframing ACV, and now you're in charge of things and kind of putting out fires and managing people, and totally askew from what you did on day one.
No, it's definitely a transition, and I've as the CTO and of the company, and someone who I was there writing most of the code for the initial version. How do you transition as you start bringing on people, and now you need to manage the people? And I've talked to a lot of CTOs that have gone through this transition, and it's a hard thing to do, because if you're not coding, you don't feel like you're doing work, right? You feel like you're slacking. You feel like I'm not doing work, and you go home. I was in meetings all day. I didn't do any work. But then you realize, well, that is your work, right? So it is a tricky transition, but it's one from I need to write code and I need to push code out and deliver features and deliver this and that, to I need to build an organization that can deliver it faster, higher quality, in an organization that can scale. Because obviously, one person or two people trying to, as the company grows, you got to keep pace with that, and you got to make sure that certain people are in meetings and keeping aware of changes going on and prioritization. But you also have to have people shielded away that can actually get some what I call real work done, right? So that's the trick. But I think it's hard for a lot of engineers to make that transition, and some people don't like making that transition and managing and making sure everyone's on the same page and moving in the same direction. And when and the more people you have, the more personalities and issues and conflicts. So mitigating those, and it does go to more of a coaching, leading kind of role, as opposed to I just gonna put my headphones on and just pound out some code.
Well, and imagine, just like any skill, there's an art form to coding, and trying to work in that. You don't practice it enough, you lose it.
Sure.
Just like anything. So have you been able to at least kind of find that itch, elsewhere to make sure you're staying up to date while you're also in meetings for 16 hours a day.
Yeah, and I do, I do kind of at night or whatever. I'll still work on some code.
Do you just go into the code, mess it up, and then
no.
What'd you do today?
No.
Come on, man.
No, so I do other. I wouldn't trust myself to
You're right.
to go in at this point and start coding. I'd get pulled into too many meetings to get anything out. So yeah, it's more keeping learning new languages as we start adding different technologies, staying up with that. Yeah, it is tough. It is one of those things. The more you code, the better. So it's it's a little bit of a from that perspective, you got to sacrifice a little bit of that, but it's one of those things. I did that at when I was at Z80. I wasn't coding all day. I still did some stuff at night just to keep my skills sharp, but I'm confident enough that if I needed to ramp back up, I can ramp back up, and that's not a big issue. But yeah.
For the listeners who want to learn more about ACV, we had Joe Neiman on last year. Great kind of history, and goes through in depth of from hiring George Shimon to scaling. And I know you guys will be in the news here soon with great news, so that's always good to know. So we'll throw it in reverse and take a hard left. As I joked in the beginning about some crypto prices. Yeah. You're big in the Buffalo blockchain group.
Yep.
When does ACV come out with their ICO? Is that soon? I hope. Have you convinced the guys to?
They're coming around. Maybe when Ethereum was at $40, there wasn't as much excitement, but at over 1,000 to 1,300, people start getting more excited. So
for someone with your skill set, you've been in the tech space, for almost 20 years at this point. Mm-hmm. Blockchain technology obviously is something that fascinates you. That's why you were kind of pivotal with the Buffalo Blockchain Group. What excites you so much about maybe Buffalo's role in, because we kind of missed out on the .com boom. We didn't have many .com companies that either lasted or stayed here. Mm-hmm. Is blockchain, is an opportunity for us here in Buffalo?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the whole decentralized movement and cryptocurrencies, there's just such a lack of talent in that space. Nobody's, I guess Toronto has a really good scene, but and obviously Silicon Valley, just the nature of having a bunch of engineers, but it's still wide open in terms of who can be a player, in terms of developing the talent, starting to build companies in this. It's still so small of a community, and the number of companies and the number of people that are actually doing stuff in the space, that if you somewhat are actually doing something, you can still be a big name and make a name for yourself. So, I think there's a huge opportunity for Buffalo, and like you said, we didn't take advantage of the initial .com boom, and but I think this is as I look more and more into it, this is the next web and the new way things will be done. Whether if you look at it from the finance side of things with cryptocurrencies, or you look at just blockchain in general, there's going to be a huge need for there's a huge movement in that direction. It's a gamble, and maybe it'll never turn out to be anything, and Bitcoin and Ethereum will go to zero, and we'll have to go do something else. But it's taking those risks and trying to lead the receiver a little bit and try to make a very educated guess on where it's going to end up. Yeah. And from everything I've read, and I'm super bullish on it. From the moment I read the Ethereum white paper, I was like, this is amazing, and that's really when I got hooked on it, and there's so much opportunity, and you look at Facebook and Twitter and Google and all these
almost
players.
Every industry can be impacted by, I think, blockchain, especially Ethereum at some point.
Yeah, in some ways, and I think it'll be interesting to find out which are the actual good use cases and which ones are maybe too early for its time. Yeah. But I mean, we're in such a period of consolidation where Facebook owns all of your data, Google owns all of your data. They know
everything
about you, and all they're trying to do is shove ads in your face. Yeah. And it's kind of sad that's you have PhDs and all these people at Facebook that are just sole goal is to shove ads in your face, and it's terrible. So I'm very I'm just not happy with the state of those things and allowing people to have control of their own data, and be able to, build the internet in the way the internet was meant to be built, in a very decentralized way, without these huge players controlling everything and ability to affect elections and all that other stuff that comes along with it. So that's why I'm really bullish on it. And I think there's a great movement, and it's still super early in the whole process. Yeah.
And, just to kind of give some scope around how early things are, I came across a posting that Visa was looking for an Ethereum expert with 8 years experience.
Right. It's only, right. Yeah. It's 5 years old. So good luck with that.
So, needless to say, hopefully startups embrace blockchain, because the existing behemoths in finance still don't understand.
Yeah, and I think the reality is too just the shift in business models and the way people view how a company makes money, because a lot of these things are essentially open source projects with a token attached to them, and the token is what provides the value in that for that token or that organization. So there's going to need to be a total retraining around these different token economies and crypto economics. So I know we're working with UB trying to have that at least be taught at some level within there, so we have more people that are aware of cryptocurrencies and crypto economics and more decentralized companies.
Well, Dan, if people want to engage more with you or Buffalo Blockchain or ACV, how can they get in front of Dan?
I'm Magnuszewski on Twitter. I'm around. I don't know.
You usually have a mug in your hand and your phone in a notepad. So.
Yeah. No, I'm always around. So Twitter, I guess, is a good place to start to find me. So.
Well, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Thanks for everything you and some of the key people early on did for the startup scene here. It's coming to fruition.
Yeah, for sure. And one great. I just want to throw one more thing around the I guess cryptocurrencies and decentralized movement. There's a couple great books. The Master Switch is a great book around how information economies have decentralized and re-centralized over the years. So it's a great book, and The Internet of Money is another great book to kind of give people an intro into these types of things.
And spend the time and read the white papers for Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Absolutely.
Don't do anything
don't
Coinbase until you read those.
Well, you can buy an amount that you're happy to lose and get in early, because that'll only motivate you to learn more, hopefully. Exactly. But yeah, definitely dig in and do the research, and don't watch the news. Don't watch the news to get your news. Actually, do your own research. So.
All right. We'll catch up with you down the road sometime.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. I want to thank Dan again for joining us on the podcast. If you want to learn more about what Dan's doing, just like he said, follow him on Twitter. And you can follow 43 North on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all the social networks, really. And hey, like I said in the beginning of the show, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you haven't done so already, please leave a review on iTunes. I really need some reviews, guys. Really need you to just take 30 seconds, leave a review, say you like the show, say you like my soothing voice in your car stereo every day on your commute. It would mean a lot to me. Next week on the podcast, we've got Dylan Cox from PitchBook, and it's a great insight into just how well Western New York has been doing in terms of venture capital data and money raised and all good things data, really. It's a really data-driven episode. Dylan's a lot smarter than me, so I let him carry most of the conversation, unlike right now where I'm just going on and on and on because I'm trying to wrap up the episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Nate Benson, and we'll see you at the next one.